Well, good morning. My name is Tom McCarthy. I'm the general manager at Mojave Water Agency, and I've got to say I'm happy to be here. This is my first high desert water symposium, and I must say it's quite a pleasure to see so many of you. We've got a count of about 185 people gathered here to talk about water on a Wednesday morning. I think that's impressive. So thank you for being here. We have a great day for you. I couldn't help but think this morning, I was a paper boy all through elementary school and junior high, and two things came out of that. One, I get up early, and now I can't do anything about it. I get up early every day. And two, I read the paper every day. And this morning, the timing was quite coincidental. I read an article today about not only is Johannesburg in South Africa dealing with what they call day zero, the day they run out of water supply, but now cities in Iraq, Morocco, and Spain are all calculating their day zero because they see it on the horizon. And I thought that was particularly interesting. Yesterday, there was a vote regarding a significant water reliability project within the state of California, and our keynote speaker, Charlie Wilson, will speak to that project. It's so we, as Californians, don't have to worry about day zero. So we've got Charlie Wilson coming. We've also got Ellen Hannock, who will cover really a wide spectrum of key issues that we deal with here in California, whether it's that issue of reliability, but also the issue of making sure water is accessible to all Californians. And not only are we moving water around, but we also have to consider the environment around us. So Ellen will speak to all those issues and more. And then to wrap up the morning, we'll bring it a little closer to home, and we'll have a panel discussion with a local small retailer, 29 Palms Water District, a larger retailer, Eastern Municipal Water District, and then we'll also have on the line, we're trying to move into the 21st century, our legal advocate from, or excuse me, our legislative advocate from Sacramento. We're going to try to have him, Ed Manning, via conference call, or excuse me, video conference, so we'll have him on the screen. So we've got an interesting day ahead of us. And I should note that there is a break at 10:30. So that's about an hour and a half. So if you can stay still for that long, we'll be in good shape. So to kick things off, it's my pleasure to introduce John Richard, Pastor John Richard, who will give our invocation and our flag salute. John?
Please join me as we pray. Dear Lord, we do thank you just for another beautiful day that you have given us. Lord, we thank you for the opportunity that has already been granted us this morning to gather together, to network, to fellowship, to enjoy some good food and coffee. And Lord, thank you just for this event today. Lord, I ask that you would bless it as they're looking at a very important resource. Lord, we know that you have given us many resources and we're to be good stewards of them. So as we're looking at just water and how to use it well and how to be good stewards, Lord, I ask that you would bless this event. Lord, again, we thank you for this day. We thank you in your almighty name. Amen. Would you please remain standing and join me in our pledge to the American flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you, Pastor Richard. I had the opportunity to do a little mingling before we started, and I couldn't help but notice a significant amount of elected officials. Just so I don't make a key mistake and forget somebody's name, I was wondering if we could please have all the elected officials that are here, please stand. It's a good amount. I think all of us that would agree it's a significant amount of work, one, to get elected, and then two, it's all your time. Could you please join me in giving them a round of applause? Now I'll ask the elected officials. I think you all would agree things can't happen without key members of your community helping you out. I know there's a lot of people here that give their own time. Probably almost every single person in this room has given their own time for issues like water, power, helping others out. So if you'd all please give each other a round of applause. Thank you for your time. At this time, I'd like to pass the microphone off to the president of our board of directors for the Mojave Water Agency, Kimberly Cox.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that introduction. On behalf of the Mojave Water Agency Board of Directors, we would like to welcome all of you. Thank you for taking time out of this beautiful desert day to come and join us here. We know you all have very busy schedules. I'm really proud of our board of directors. They are the epitome of collaboration and community service. And at this time, I'd like to ask all of them to stand up so you can see them. We have Director Mike Page, Vice President Carl Coleman, Richard Hall, Bev Lowry, Jim Ventura, and Smitty Smith. Thanks to you for your leadership in this valley. Today we're here to hear about key policy issues and infrastructure issues that are facing the state. Here in the high desert, we have together collaboratively faced challenge after challenge, dealing with our water needs in the desert. We've put in pipelines, we've built collaborative infrastructure together like the R-Cubed, we've helped in water quality and data analysis because we know we're all in this together. And just when we think we've crossed that last hurdle and we're home free, we've got sustainability in our sights and we're doing great, we have other mandates and challenges that come down upon us from the state, the environment, things that we cannot control. Today you're going to hear about some of what is happening in those areas on the state level. But I am convinced in my more than 30 years of living here in the high desert, we have accomplished tremendous things. We're on the map. We are viewed as leaders in the area of water management. And just by virtue of the fact that all of you are here today to share and to learn shows that we are in this together, and we will continue to meet the challenges that lay ahead of us in a collaborative fashion. So the people of our region are committed to ensuring that sustainable future and working together towards resiliency. And I'd like to share with you this quote from Margaret Mead. "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Thank you so much for being here, and we hope you enjoy the program today.
Thank you, Director Cox. At this time, I'd like to welcome out one of our sponsoring partners. It's no coincidence that we're at a college today where we have a place where problems are identified and solutions are identified. At this time, I'd like to bring out one of our sponsoring partners, Karen Ingleson with the VVC Foundation. Karen?
Just to be clear, my name is Karen Engelson. I'm the Vice President of Student Services, but we are very happy that the foundation is sponsoring this. And I want to really welcome you all to this college. It's such a beautiful day in the high desert, and I never get tired of seeing the sun rise over the mountains and just explode upon the sky, and the way that the sun continues across the mountains and just changes color throughout the day. We're really privileged to live in this beautiful valley. I'm very grateful for so many things. I'm here to welcome you so much on behalf of the foundation, on behalf of the college, to our beautiful campus, where truly water is at the center of our community, with the beautiful lake that we get to enjoy every day. And I'm so pleased to see our community members coming out and enjoying the lake, walking around with their children, feeding the ducks, having lunch on the picnic tables, etc. Your presence here today really affirms two very important natural resources: water, which is necessary for us to grow and thrive, and learning, which is necessary for us as individuals and as a community to learn and thrive. And so there are many ways that your presence is supporting the community college mission. Most importantly, I think we've got to remember that water science is an important program and source of study and career opportunities for our students. We have a great agricultural program. I think Neville is here today. Water science classes. I had the great privilege of serving as a CTE dean in Ventura. And Ventura College has a real thriving water science program, working with Dr. Ford and Joanna and a really talented team. I really came to appreciate so much the vastness of what water represents. We really take it for granted. The economy of water is fascinating. The reclamation efforts, and my folks live on the coast, and with the desalinization experiments or efforts that I know they're working very hard at it, really haven't gotten it down yet. But there's so much scholarship and the academy and education that you bring to our community. So I really want to thank you for all that you do, representing the possibilities for our students in their career pursuits. And let me just just sort of plant a little seed. When we were having some strong workforce discussions in Ventura County and talking about water science, along with College of the Canyons, there was some discussion about doing some online programs to take water science classes to smaller communities such as ours. So maybe that's something that we can look at together for our students and for you all, because I know that the jobs that are going to be created in this short amount of time with a lot of retirees, et cetera, present a lot of employment opportunities. So thank you for being here in representative of our students and the futures that they have with your profession. Secondly, I really want to honor you as lifelong learners, being here, coming together around some common interests and expanding the work that you do. As we said, water and learning are what really help our community thrive and grow. So thank you for that. And then lastly, as a part of our community, we are a community college, and the way that we can come together around issues that are relevant to all of us in support of common interests, common goals, is really a beautiful thing. So thank you for being on our campus. On behalf of our Board of Trustees, our campus president, Roger Wagner, our administrators, faculty, staff, students, we're all very proud to be Victor Valley College. We welcome you and hope that you have a really lovely day on our campus. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. This gentleman is a UCLA graduate. Another UCLA graduate. Sounds like there's a couple out there. After a 25-year career at Southern California Edison, he now has his own consulting firm. He is a board member at the Santa Margarita Water District, and he's also the executive director of the Southern California Water Coalition that works for many, many water agencies in Southern California. He's someone that's quite familiar with the legislative process. And if you haven't seen him speak, you're in for a treat. He will tell you how he feels, and he will tell you how he thinks. It is my honor to introduce Charlie Wilson.
Thank you very much. Okay, they promised me they were going to turn me on, and then it's really just hard to turn me off. But thank you very much for the opportunity to share some things with you this morning. I see in the crowd, now you guys are going to have to look this up, but Charlie Wilson, for those of you that don't know, I could be two people at any one time. There's Charlie Wilson of the Private Wars. No, I did not serve in Congress, nor will you ever find me in a hot tub in Las Vegas. Or Charlie Wilson of the Gap Band of the 1970s, still performing to this day. But I'm not going to sing and I'm not going to dance, I promise. I've been through an awful lot of things for the last 30 years, and I have learned in the electric utility business an awful lot of lessons that I think are applicable to water. Somewhere along my path, somebody got to me and I committed the Harry Carey like many of you in the audience, and I thank you for being elected. When you cross over that threshold and go from working for electeds to being an elected, that transition is something they question your sanity. In fact, my wife actually was in this business when we met. She spent 1 year working for an elected and said, "You people are all out of your freaking minds." Quit, sold everything, and is now a marriage family therapist and psychoanalyst. So I go home every day, I get my therapy, 30 years in the making, I'm still working on it, okay? So just know that. But what I found in my days with the Edison Company and what I'm seeing now beginning to transition into water is that the changes in regulation, the changes in public policy, the changes in technology, the needs of our public are moving at a rate that is much faster than anybody really ever anticipated. And so the question then becomes, how do you prepare for the future, and what are the significant issues that you drive towards into the future, or what is it then that you're going to be dragged into the future? And I will simply tell you, again candidly, at the Edison Company with 100 years of history, kind of like water, they were dragged into the new era of energy. And that now is sped so fast, but it's coming in water. And so I want to talk about a couple of things. Oh, Charlie, see, technology. Where's the IT director when you need him? There we go. So let me start with this. I am here predominantly as the executive director of the Southern California Water Coalition. This organization actually began, which is part of the story today, in 1984. The last time some guy named Jerry Brown had just finished being governor of the state of California and had proposed an alternative conveyance facility, canal, around the Sacramento Bay Delta to bring fresh water to Southern California and the Central Valley in order to provide California with a reliable water supply for our future. And what happened? For those that were old enough to remember that, you guys still don't know. It went to the ballot. It went to the ballot in 1982. That ballot measure was defeated. And so we didn't build the peripheral canal back in the 1980s. And yesterday, which we'll talk a bit more about, the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California voted by 61, almost 62%, to build now what is a twin tunnel. Virtually similar, very similar situation, but for all the same reasons, it just took us 35 years to get there. But the value proposition is still there. I want to talk a little bit about that. But this organization was born in 1984 because of that defeat on the peripheral canal. Why? Southern California, with the dominant population base and the one that carries state elections, they voted about 60% in favor of the peripheral canal. 90% of those people in San Francisco and their surrounding communities at the time voted hell no. Not just no, but hell no. We are not allowing Southern Californians to, quote, steal our water and to simply bring it to Southern California so you people can fill your swimming pools and wash your cars. A false narrative, but that narrative, I would tell you today, still exists. So this organization was founded by a group of very forward-thinking county supervisors and brought together what is now the broadest umbrella approach and coalition on water issues in the state. So who belongs to this group now? And it runs from Kern County to the Mexican border and from the coast all the way to the state line. Water agencies you would expect, counties, cities, business, industry, agriculture, labor, and nonprofit organizations all have come together because they understand the value proposition that is water and what it means to Southern California specifically as we go into the future. And we have now been working on this issue for some 35 years. I took over as the executive director just 2 years ago and had the privilege of serving as a member of the board for a number of years. And so I've been with this group. I love the way they reach out, but it's predominantly based not as a lobbying tool, but is simply to educate And we have an adage that if you educate to advocate, if people have an understanding of what it is, of the value, if people have an understanding of the issue, they will advocate in their own special interest. I don't have to stimulate you to do that. I don't have to bludgeon you. You only have to advocate in your own interest, but you need to understand. And if you understand, then you are more powerful with your local elected officials and then carrying that to a broader state level. Now, having also said that, I can understand that in Southern California, yes, we have the population base, and yes, we get into the north-south debate and the narrative, and this has become kind of old, but I'm going to share it with you anyway. If you had to split the state of California in half, population-wise, what's north and what's south? What's the divider? Kern County? Anybody else? Kern's a reasonable expectation. Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles. So, for anybody you know in the Valley, they're northerners. Anybody in Orange County, we're all clearly southerners. So the population clearly is in the south. What we've created over the last 60 years is the 6th largest economy in the world. The second piece of this equation is Southern California doesn't go it alone. If you don't have a fully integrated system that starts with the state and works its way all the way through down to local retail agencies and cities, it's a false premise. And what we went through yesterday in terms of those that would want to argue farmers versus urban versus rural, that's crap. We're one state. And when I pull my driver's license out, it says Californian. And together as Californians, we work to solve long-term vexing issues like water reliability and water sustainability. So there's our group. We cover an awful lot of issues. Again, it's the largest group of its kind. But because of that, then we are allowed to get into some of the nuances. We start first at the umbrella, and we started with the state system, and then we work our way down into specific areas of interest, where stormwater, water and energy is actually new. We've added that in the last year, so I'll talk more about that in a minute. We do engage in the legislative process, but we're a nonprofit, so it's a little bit. But again, all we want to do is to make sure that our policymakers understand what the future looks like, and how this fully integrated network and system works. So it's not just either or, it's an and conversation. We need this and. So when we had to go through with conservation with the State Water Board, yes, we need conservation. Yes, you need more efficiency. We can all do a better job. And we need to talk about the regulations that keep us from being able to provide reliable water. And we need to talk about new technology. And we need to talk about stormwater. And we need to talk about water quality. And we need to talk about groundwater projects. So, principally, because of where we started with California WaterFix, formerly known as that peripheral canal. Yesterday, as I indicated, the Metropolitan Water District, and this is the great story of the day, was highlighted for me actually by the general manager. Yesterday's vote at Metropolitan was the single most important vote in 100 years in water in this state. 100 years. Because it said yesterday, to summarize, without getting too wonky about it, that the Southern California ratepayers and the state water project members were willing to put the collateral up and fund to the tune of $11 billion a system that when designed and constructed will be the reliability base for us to then do all the other nice things we talk about. The debate for so long was, well, will Southern California do it alone? Will the state water contractors do it alone? Well, how do you get those Central Valley people in? Those rat bastard farmers just making millions of dollars selling almonds, they're just not willing to pay. Yesterday, Metropolitan said they'll need the water. We are absolutely confident that they will want and buy fully loaded water costs when they need it. The alternative with the groundwater situation in the Central Valley is untenable. And at some point in the next 15 years, they either fallow land, stop growing, or they come now to Metropolitan to buy water and get into exchange agreements. So yesterday was about finance, was about whether or not they would take the risk, but really yesterday was about leadership and whether or not there was a group of people, an institution that was willing to lead the state of California in doing what they believed would be right. It does not come without controversy. But the facts are still this. 30% of Southern California's water comes through the State Water Project in Sacramento. When we did public opinion polling, which I love to do in places like Los Angeles, and said, hey, do you know where your water comes from? They point to the faucet. And then I asked them, but do you know where the delta is? Well, yeah, the delta faucet. Close. So that gives us the starting point. So then when we start talking about this project, when we start talking about its issue, we didn't speak to this in terms of acre feet. We didn't talk about cubic feet per second. We didn't talk about the usual, what they call the water backpack that most of us in the water business carry around. We went right straight down to families and households and spoke to it in terms that they would understand. Of what value is clean drinking water to you and your family? Of what value and what are you willing to pay? And do these costs based on a monthly charge for the water that you use, not as a tax, what are you willing to pay? And when you got to this point and they said, you know what? 3 years ago, we said it was $5. People were willing to pay $5 a month. Yesterday, doing the full project as it's described by Metropolitan, they estimate it's about $4.80 a month at complete build-out. So we actually magically ended up under that $5 figure, but we already knew the public's acceptance level and where it came from. But it provided, and you articulated, what the value proposition for that water to come out of your tap and clean and pure for your family at a time, much like the energy business, it is absolutely unacceptable to turn the tap on and have nothing come out. Absolutely unacceptable. As Tom indicated, they got lots of major cities, technologically advanced cities around the world running to day zero. People standing in line at water trucks with armed guards in California as the 6th largest economy in the world is absolutely unacceptable. But the issue was who will actually go first, who will lead, who will take that risk on, and then mitigate that risk going forward. And that's what Metropolitan did yesterday. So that's great news. That project, even at best on its schedule, will not be ready to deliver water for at least 17 years. And now we go through all the normal cycle of any major project that's going to be sued, going to be litigated, got to be designed. So whether schedules stay on time, clearly there's a need and a desire to move quickly. But in the meantime, you've got a portfolio approach, and we then argue the issue of you need state water, that is your base. After your base, let's talk about what then makes the most sense for other parts of the world. I'm going to go through this. These were arguments that were helpful. Actually, I do have to mention this because Ellen's here. When we did our polling early in this last year, we already knew 2/3 of Southern California supported the project. Yesterday, when I gave testimony at Metropolitan using the PPIC's most recent poll, that rose to 86% of Angelinos. Ironically, the city of Los Angeles voted against the project yesterday. Curious. But we believe that modernizing the state system had to come first. It was time for action, and we've been advocating for a while, educating for a while. I would love to take credit of being able to move people from 67% to 86%. That'd be kind of egotistical. But just the fact that we have had droughts and rain, water for the first time in about 30 years has really been top of mind, which I think really helped drive this issue and helping get people to make their voices heard. I will also tell you yesterday, amongst all of the folks in the room, there were 75 people that provided public testimony, and it literally came from every segment of the population, from Ventura all the way to San Diego, and very much in between. Even had some folks fly all the way down from Stockton to come talk about it. But the all-the-above approach then, once you have established your base, and we are now hopeful that the State Water Project will move forward and we will modernize to something other than a Model T, which is how it currently works today, and we all knew that the Bay Delta is going to fail, and how are you going to protect the water supply? But what else do you do? And there's lots of other options, and these are all the things that then become important, predicated upon your local geography, your local hydrology, and your local political leadership. And how do you make this happen? The new one that sort of popped up in the argument yesterday not to do the WaterFix, well, we can just do it by storms. We do stormwater capture. If we just took the water out of the LA River, when storms hit, we just bank that, we'd be fine. We don't have to do anything. Except the stormwater comes in California out of the year, your stormwater comes, 80% of the water comes in 4 days. It flows from up here, down the hill. In 4 days is when you get all your water. So the question then is, where do you put that water? How do you capture it? How do you clean it? And where do you put it in the meantime? So short of breaking walls in the LA River and the stormwater channel and flooding out cities where you can percolate water, a challenge here, very expensive. But it is an option, and it's something that can be done with dry time flows. And there's an opportunity there. Los Angeles County, in November, will put a ballot measure together through the County of LA for a parcel tax. Well, we all know how much voters love to talk about taxes, particularly property taxes. So their job in articulating the value proposition of stormwater, why it means something valuable to LA County, will be really important between now and November. And every other county around Los Angeles is watching. How do they fare? What do they do? What mistakes can we learn from? So because we all have the same mandates, we all have the same opportunities, the question is, what are we going to do about it? So usually somebody goes first, and then we learn from that. LA is the next one in the queue. They've done it. Oh, by the way, in LA, they've run, done 3 times they've attempted to do this in stormwater, and they've never gotten the voters to accept it. Very tall order. Water recycling makes perfect sense. Use more of what you've got over and over and over again. Just take nature's natural cycle, let's compress it, and we'll just manufacture it. Orange County is the world leader in the use of recycled water. Out of their sanitation district, they put it through the Orange County Water District, clean it, put it back in the aquifer in the upper part of Anaheim. Fabulous opportunity. Not everybody does it. LA County is now looking at this as an opportunity with 2 of the largest sanitation plants in the world. Why are they not recycling that water and putting it back into the system? Great question. Very expensive. But it's something that has to be built out and something people are looking at. We can all do more, again, with recycling. Again, that's another energy lesson that I learned. Groundwater cleanup. Depending, again, on your topography, we've all got great water basins. State now is regulating groundwater basins in a way different than they have to avoid the overpumping, particularly up in areas like the Central Valley. But those groundwater basins, as you well know, come with their own challenges. With historic use, there are issues associated with groundwater and the cleanup of that groundwater. There's also now this discussion about the break between recycling and groundwater. Does it make sense to clean water, to then put it in the ground, to then extract it from the ground and clean it again? Or could we put it in once and clean it once to reduce the cost? Or better yet, if you went to direct potable, I love the water term, direct potable, means can I take recycled water and just clean it to a level that I can just drink it and not have to put it through its other system? Technology is there, health concerns have to be addressed, and the regulations have to track, because the last thing you could ever do again as a water agency is make somebody sick because you didn't catch something. So groundwater cleanup, desalination, folks love to point to desalination as a cure-all. That came up yesterday as well. To replace the State Water Project, you would have to have built 12 ocean desalination plants between Ventura and San Diego, the same size as what they've just built in Carlsbad. Environmentalists likely won't let that happen, since it took 17 years to build the original desal plant in Carlsbad. And now they're still working on one in Orange County and Huntington Beach, and it's going on 18 years in development. And those bars sort of keep moving. Again, you can do ocean desal, but now you're creating an energy-intensive use at a time when the state of California is also driving very hard at the reduction of greenhouse gases. So how do you provide the energy involved to desalinate water at a time when the Air Board wants you to reduce and to use renewables and reduce your greenhouse gases, but still produce water? Where does that balance come in the public policy arena? And that's the kind of thing the state legislature is going to have to really worry about. There's a place for desal, but again, it's expensive and it has environmental impact. And then we get to the conservation efficiency. Cheapest water you'll ever use is the water that you don't use. Yeah, we can do that. The question is what's right for you here in the high desert? Is that the same as what's right for those in Los Angeles? For Ventura? For farming? How do you set those? And is that something that should be done locally? Or is that something that should be mandated by the state? That's a great public policy question. I hear a lot about the talk about Australia. I hear a lot of talk about Israel and how they run their system and how the government controls a fraction the size of California with a fraction of the diversity. And that's why I always like to share with people too, being California, for better or for worse, it happens in California first. Because of our diversity, because of our size and complexity, it comes with challenges that others may not have. It also, when you look at places like Israel, which is a great place to look at it based on their weather patterns, but in their case, it's also a national security issue. But then I don't have people lobbing shells from just across the county line into my cities. So in their case, it really becomes a life and death matter in how they work and what they have to do to remain completely independent of those around them. So, as I said, we're focusing as an institution sort of the next available big topic. In fact, we're going to do this at the end of April when we have our next quarterly board meeting and start talking about this issue of stormwater. And we're about to issue a white paper on this issue about what are the actual costs to operate for those projects that have been installed around the 5-county region so that we can actually have quantifiable data to work from, not just theory. It's really nice to think about and theorize, but we wanted to have some practical application. And how does that work so that we can give those local public policymakers, again, make an informed choice, not just somebody promises. So we have some history to work from. So we got that coming on the 20th. This is a campaign that we did on conservation. And as a nonprofit, I really enjoy these things because I can say things in public that public agencies can't. And so when we got to conservation, we created this lawn dude character. We did it in partnership with Clear Channel Advertising, and this was a billboard campaign we put together over the series of 2 years at the height of the drought. Now, these two guys were created around the primary election 2 years ago, because this was the last piece. And we shared this. In fact, we're the only organization to actually share their conservation program with the State Water Board. They liked this so much, they had us come up and present to their board. The only question I got was at the height of the drought, when we put Lawn Dude up, why is he still green, Charlie? I thought we were turning all the yards brown. It's like, well, it's campaign season. You got to look your best. So we makeup and hair color. My favorite line, actually, in this, again, this is what a public agency could never say, but just prior to Lawn Dude and the election campaign, we had Lawn Dude out advocating to manscape your landscape. Not enough of a laugh. Let that resonate for just a minute. That's the kind of thing that got people's attention. That's the kind of thing we could do that then's like, what? That's just weird. What are you talking about? And I got them to go to our Lawn Dude campaign, and within that, directed people to local agencies and what they could do with their conservation and efficiency programs. But this ran over the course of 4 years, again at the height of the drought, and it was effective not just in getting to sort of your average ratepayers, but it was then targeting new audiences, millennial audiences that were kind of coming into and just learning about and becoming water consumers for the first time, having to pay a water bill. I've then also argued at the state, maybe what we ought to do in the next time is offer special rebates when we send our children out of state for college. Because when you remove an 18-year-old from showers, water conservation becomes real. This is sort of one of the emerging issues, and this nexus between water and energy. As I described before, as a state, our single largest or most important policy objective now is about greenhouse gas reduction. Moving into renewable energy, what does that mean? How do we get there? States driving very hard to lead the world on climate change. And so as a water agency, we become very large industrial consumers. We become large potential producers of renewable energy as well. And so where in the equation for water does energy fit? And how do the conservation programs, how does efficiency fit? How do the treatment operations and technology that we utilize, how does that fit this equation? And we're now starting to work with the Association of California Water Agencies on this issue about decarbonizing water and what does that mean, so that water agencies and the water sector can get out in front and help lead on this issue, and again, not be dragged through it based on somebody else's thought of what the regulation should look like, and that we then simply have to respond. Responding is always much more difficult than being in front of something. So this is what I advocate, and you're doing it today by showing up on a Wednesday morning, talk about water. It's like, holy cow, particularly on my Easter break. We do forums, workshops, becoming involved. And I will always tell people in a setting like this, if you come today and simply listen, had a great cup of coffee, a nice breakfast, and I go home and I do nothing with what I learned today, then we have failed you. Every time you come to a forum like this, you are naturally inclined, you are already the interested party. Take what you learned today and find a place to do something with it. I will not predispose to tell you where that is, but take the information from here, engage your neighbors, engage your colleagues, engage your community in bringing the importance of water and making decisions locally about your water to your community. Organizations like mine, this is what we do. This is what we are about. But there are 25 million people within the territory that we cover from Bakersfield south. There is not a snowball's chance in Miami that I'm going to get to all 25 million people. I need your help to do that. We need you to become a part of organizations like this, or to spread the word within your community and to bring forum like this so we can illuminate the various specific issues in the high desert and how the high desert should go about resolving these water sustainability issues. That's who we are. That's what I do. Questions? See? Stunned silence.
If I may, I'll just let everybody know we're going to have, you see microphones here on the side. We'll have 2 Mojave Water Agency employees able to walk those microphones around. Please raise your hand if you've got a question for Charlie, and we will get that microphone to you so everybody can hear your question.
If you don't ask it, we'll just make it up.
Yeah, he will. He can.
I'll go first. Smitty, board member from Mojave Water Agency. With the carbon, can we do more hydroelectric plants along the peripheral canal or the aqueduct, as most of us know it as? Because we are working on a project out at our distribution area.
That is exactly one of the issues that Aqua is now looking at. If you're a large hydro producer, obviously there are folks that say, hey, why isn't hydro part of our renewable portfolio? And so there's interest in doing that. But more importantly, it's in small hydro units of where you can take things off stream, use small turbines, and then use that as part of the grid support. Absolutely. That's exactly the kind of leadership we're talking about within the water community that addresses the state policy. The question then is with the state board and with the air board, what's the trade-off? What do we then get in return for that? We're willing to make that investment. How does that then change what we're required to do? And does it make it easier or harder? So it's a great question. It's a great concept, and I think there's a lot of opportunity with it.
Matthew Huffine from Lewis Center. When you mentioned Orange County in 18 years on the desal plant, and then you mentioned in the same sentence trying to be carbon neutral in California, it dawned on me there's a possibility to use all the rooftops of the area being served by the desal plant to possibly collect solar at a discount so that the person who hosts the rooftop doesn't have to pay the tax for the water that would come as a result of the desal. And you'd kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone, possibly. I was just popped up in my head.
In theory, absolutely. But the energy load that it takes to run a desal plant can't be accomplished with doing rooftop there. That's why they try to bring large-scale solar up here. And then it requires the transmission lines to go back down the hill. So the energy level and intensity probably is going to come through contracts. You can certainly do some on-site that makes sense. I also see and do a lot of work with folks that are doing battery storage so that you actually take optimum efficiencies of the system, both the grid, whatever you have on site, and your business operation. You integrate them all, like the water system. You integrate the system for its full economic value. That has great potential to it. That's how you address energy-intensive treatment and water supply reliability types of projects, but you've got to be able to do that in a context where the state's going, knowing that you're going to get hammered on the other end if you don't meet those greenhouse gas impacts. So in this case, it's forced moving the technology, and it's the race to technology that'll actually allow the energy density to really run those plants without having to do, you know, much wider or vast acreage for just solar. But again, it may be a combination. It may be solar, it may be wind, it may be some kind of gasification. If you use the treatment plants out of the sanitation district, they have renewable energy there on site adjacent to that Huntington Beach plant that could also be put to work. All of those are opportunities, but you've got to be in a mindset to take advantage of the opportunity and not be the one that's being forced to do it. And that's kind of where Poseidon and others are today. That's what we're trying to bring at Aqua around the Energy Committee and what we're talking about there.
Given what's actually happening in Johannesburg and all across the world, and the inordinate amount of time it actually takes to build the necessary infrastructure, does California actually have a day zero calculated out? And if not, at what point do you actually have to calculate that out? How close do you actually have to be to it?
Ellen, I'm going to leave that for you. I've never heard a 0 day in California. More often what I hear is it's not a shortage of water in California. It's about when does it come, how do you move it, how do you store it, how do you treat it. And that, again, is a fully integrated system can handle those challenges. And I'll go back and I'll use, again, the WaterFix as one of the real opportunities that has. If, in fact, as climate continues to change, our snowpack will continue to decline, which means things will come in rain more than snow. It's great when it snows because it runs off slowly and you can capture and you can manage that system, which is what we have designed today. But if in fact the snowpack is going to be less and less and the rain is more and more, you're going to get faster river flows, heavier times where you need to move water quickly. And that's what this tunnel system is designed to do, is to take advantage of the gulp sip approach so that when the water is there, you can take it, move it, and store it. At a time when it's not there in drought, then you don't have to take it because you've now prepared for the next drought cycle with your storage. So all of these things have to work in concert with one another. And so long as we balkanize the system and say, it's your problem or your problem, do it on your own, doing it on your own is a way more expensive proposition and far more risky than trying to integrate a large state. Again, the advantage, big state, very diverse. Weak, we're a big state and we're really diverse. And it's complicated. It's not easy. It's not a bumper sticker. It's not an emoji. And it's not some tweet that you can do just because. You have to identify the issue, lead on it, and then have people that are competent working every day to make it reality. And yes, infrastructure takes a while. Streets, roads, train, these things don't happen overnight. And I never want to be in the position of a Cape Town where you have to do something. I lived through, in fact, when I left, I lived through the wells on Catalina Island salting out. Edison runs the water system on Catalina Island. And for 3 years, we trucked bottled water to the camps on the far side of the island. What kept Avalon up and running was an ocean desal plant. But nobody ever wants to be in a position where you've run out of water and you can't serve your constituencies. That's unacceptable. And so planning for the future, even if it takes 10 to 15 years, 15 years will be here and gone tomorrow. We're either working towards it or we're waiting for failure. And that's the option. That's what it really boils down to. Are you working for the solution or are you just going to wait for the failure? And the only time we saw the failure and people react was when we had the earthquake and the freeways fell down in Los Angeles. And it took 2 years to put them back because it was on an emergency. And at that point, nobody's paying attention to the environment. Nobody's paying attention to anything but get that thing up and get it moving. So if you want a holistic system that balances environmental and economic issues, that's how you have to move forward, is you do it together, not as separate entities pointing fingers at each other and who's going to take the blame or who's going to take all the cost.
Question on integration. A lot of folks, or a lot of regions, especially in Southern California, have kind of broken down tribal walls and started to integrate recycling water, water supply, groundwater cleanup, looking at stormwater capture, so on and so forth, to maximize their water supply locally.
Now you flip that to the WaterFix, which looks like it's moving along pretty well. The engineering is relatively easy compared to some of the policies on how that one of the biggest public works projects in the world will be used. So my question is, we've done a pretty good job in some regions optimizing and getting folks to work together in the different aspects of the water industry. How do we do that as a state? Do we build this umpteen billion-dollar project and we don't have the policies or the systems in place to efficiently trade and treat the state like a big region, like we have locally? And if we do that, what have we really accomplished with this project if we don't get the politics and policy right while we're building it, not after it's built?
It's a great question, and it's really a chicken and egg. Who comes first? Somebody's got to lead, somebody had to bite the bullet, somebody had to move, otherwise we're sitting around a room looking at each other getting skinny or fat, in my case bald. Who moves first? Somebody has to take that leadership role, and then you work out the various pieces that go with it. But if you have an eye towards a cooperative, fully integrated system, it makes it easier. Administrations will change, people change, engineers can do a lot of things. It's the will of the public that engages the public policy formation and regulation. That is where you apply your pressure, that is where you engage, and together we make a better future for California than the one that could be in front of us. We have the advantage of those who came before us and the legacy to stand on their shoulders. Yesterday was time for Southern California to lead this state for the next 50 years. That leap was taken yesterday. The question I pose to you, and I thank you for allowing me to be with you today, is how will you help us meet that future challenge for the next 50 years? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Well, before Charlie came up, I said, you are really in for a treat. And that may imply our other speaker is not a treat. That is not the case. Our next speaker is different than Charlie. Again, I'll reference problems and solutions that you see up there on the screen. Our next speaker comes from an institution that is probably asking the best questions on California water today, the Public Policy Institute of California. Our next speaker is the center director as well as a senior fellow. She's been writing about infrastructure, finance, the environment, climate change for 20 years, been an editor as well. She has her PhD in economics from the University of Maryland. And again, she is also a treat, Ellen Hannock.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I knew Charlie was going to be a really hard act to follow. I don't know. So be nice to me, okay? So I'm really delighted to be here. And so Public Policy Institute of California is a nonpartisan, policy-oriented research institute. We do work on a lot of different issues that are important to California. We also do a regular public opinion survey every 6 weeks or so. Charlie mentions the results from a recent one. I lead the work on water at PPIC, and the way we work, our philosophy is that you've got to think about this it's a complicated topic, you got to think about it in an integrated way. And you can't just look at the economics, although I'm an economist, so I'm kind of biased. I like that part of it. You have to look at the engineering, you've got to look at the natural science part of it, you've got to look at the legal aspects of it. So the way we work is we bring together experts on all of those different areas and try to look at tough challenges for California and pragmatic solutions that are addressing the economic imperatives that we have, the social imperatives that we have, and protecting our environment at the same time. And what we do this work in partnership with a lot of folks around the state, and that includes a lot of water agencies and other stakeholder groups. And so, and it's been a delight to have the Mojave Water Agency as one of our partners. Whenever we get the chance, we like to get somebody from Mojave up to speak in forums in Sacramento to talk about some of your experiences here, because a lot of folks in Sacramento are not necessarily aware of a lot of the innovation that's happening down here, because you're doing your thing in a really interesting and innovative way. And So I thank you for that and look forward to kind of continuing to learn from you all. So I'm delighted to be here. What I'm going to talk to you about today, I'm going to talk to you, I had a prop though. You've got in your handouts, you've got a very short brief like this. So we do in-depth studies, but then we also try to do short, digestible pieces that are easier and quicker to read if you don't want to dig into the weeds of things. And so this was a piece that we came out with in the fall of 2017, and it was kind of a look ahead to 2018 and what are the priorities this year for California water. And so we have kind of as a context, just thinking about, as of last fall, we didn't know what the rains were going to be like this winter, but we did know that we had just come through a historic drought, 5-year drought, and then followed by a year that was very wet, indeed, and record rainfall and precipitation up in the northern part of the state. And then since this came out, we had another sort of roller coaster winter where it looked like it was dry, and then we got kind of just by the skin of our teeth, we got some big storms in March and early April. What this chart shows you is just a sort of visual of what's normal in California, which is, this is showing you how much storage is available sort of relative to the average in different months over the last 30 years or so. And the basic normal is that it's either wet or it's dry. And so we've got to kind of deal with that. And that's something that has been on display, but it's also something that's kind of getting more and more challenging as we're looking at how our climate is changing. So we kind of thought, well, let's look at a roadmap of some of the big issues that we know we're going to be on the agenda this year. This is the last year of the Brown administration. This is also the second year of a legislative session. And also some of the things that we thought as experts also should be on everybody's mind, even if it wasn't in the legislative docket. So I'm going to walk through all of them with you, but just as a little bit of a roadmap. The first area is really looking at clean and reliable water supplies. So some of this is exactly what Charlie was talking about. State needs to improve the capacity to store and move water around. The Delta conveyance is really about moving water, but storing it is also a piece of that. We've got to keep improving on managing demands. And then something that I think you might be hearing about a bit more in the next session also is looking at improving access to safe drinking water in underserved communities. The second big area is enhancing the environment. And this is really kind of helping to figure out how we tackle crisis in our freshwater ecosystems. That is something that has been sort of a thorn in the side of California water for several decades now. And we have some promising approaches, but we haven't made enough headway yet. We also have, through this last drought, really come sort of to underscore problems in our headwater forests and how to figure out approaches for that. And then we kind of end up with tackling problems in a couple of key watersheds. The Delta is one, and the Colorado River, which is another important source for Southern California, is another one. So I'll just walk through them with you. First, this category of ensuring clean and reliable water supplies. Here are a couple of pictures that kind of just give you a sense of the roller coaster that we're on. Folsom Reservoir, which is a big storage reservoir up in Northern California in the drought. And then 2017, the Oroville Dam. You probably all read about that. We really dodged a bullet. There were a couple 100,000 people that were evacuated downstream of this dam because there was a real danger of it just not making it through some of the storms that we had in 2017. So what we're seeing is, and Charlie mentioned this, our climate is warming, which means that snow is becoming rain. So that just increases the pressure of what our system has to manage and store and move during those big storm events. And we're also finding that we're getting more and more variable. The variability between the wet and the dry years is increasing. And those are both things that are projected to kind of continue amplifying in the coming decades. And our systems were designed with the historic climate in mind. So we have to really get better at at managing this and at figuring out what we do since we have less snow and more rain. Either you have to figure out a new way to store it, maybe underground or new surface storage, or you've got to use less of it. So this is just a picture here that shows you the projections for what's going to be happening to our snowpack in the main areas where we now have free storage every winter and spring. As you get from blue to red, that's sort of the red is where stuff is going to be disappearing. So by the end of the 21st century, the projections are that we may have just about a quarter of the snow water equivalent, the water storage in our snowpack that we have in the recent past. That's something that we've got to be planning for. And there are a lot of creative people working on this, thinking about how you manage surface and groundwater together so that maybe you empty your surface reservoirs out in the fall, get more of that water into the ground so that you have more room to capture the rain in the winter. That's going to require removing barriers to groundwater recharge. That's where some of the experiences that you all bring to bear here in Mojave can be really useful for the rest of the state, I think. And there's also, with the Oroville crisis, that really underscored the need to take another look at safety of our dams. So there is now an effort to do that and really figure out how to make sure they can withstand the increasing pressure that they're going to have. Second is managing demand. Now, and we all as a state did a lot during the drought to manage demand. That happened in the agricultural sector. Farmers had to reduce water use in many parts of the state. In the urban sector, there were actually mandates to do that in addition to what local agencies were asking for. We did a fair bit of analysis on this and found that while that program with the state mandate was successful in a way, in that people did save water based on what the state was asking, that was in some ways made it hard for local managers to really get it right, and that there are probably a need to really look at what the state responsibility is and the local responsibility is, and sort of better communication on that score, with probably better information sharing from locals to the state so that the state knows when locals are in a good position. A lot of the local agencies around the state, especially in Southern California, where there are very robust supplies because of investments that have been made, they were in the position of saying, look, we have enough to manage this without saving quite as much water as you're asking for, but the state wasn't confident about that. So we're suggesting kind of better communication and thinking about kind of long-term planning with that in mind. In the agricultural sector, and this is especially relevant for the Central Valley, Charlie mentioned there's a lot of problems of groundwater overdraft there, and they are going to have to bring those basins into balance now with a new state groundwater law. So they're looking to how to do that in a creative way, and looking to options like trading and how do you get credit for carrying over your water allocation so that you can manage your own risk as a grower. That's going to require better water accounting. And again, I think some of the innovations that you've introduced here in Mojave people are looking to that as helpful for what they're going to be doing there. Now, the third area, and the person who asked the question about ground zero or day zero for California, I would say there are no cities that are at that kind of risk in California, but there have been, in this last drought, small rural communities that did have water not coming out of the taps. These are communities that are especially dependent on wells, shallow wells in particular, and there are also water quality problems in some systems. So there's been a lot of effort in recent years to try to address this at the state level, and with the participation of local water agencies, local irrigation districts, and counties and nonprofits. And I think here we're making progress, but it's not something that we're going to solve overnight. I'm hoping the next panel might talk a bit about some of these issues. But there are clearly, at least this is on the drawing board now, and there's more and more light being shed on this and innovative ways to look at it. Again, this is an area where I feel that you all have some great leadership to show with the small systems program that you have here, and work on improving training, but all for small systems, but looking at consolidation options and looking for for ways to upgrade systems before they start having problems. So, natural environment. So California introduced, well, California, excuse me, and the federal government introduced a number of environmental laws back in the late 60s, all through the 70s. And we've been really successful in a lot of respects. I mean, we have much cleaner rivers now than we did back then. We have safer drinking water standards in most of our systems now. You know, we have much, I would say our systems perform better in terms of cleaner air and safer, cleaner water and safer water. A lot of things that make public health better than before we had these laws. Some of these laws also try to improve conditions for native species, and those have been successful more on the terrestrial side than on the aquatic side, and they are running into problems also in our forests, I would say. So one of the big problems that we're running into in our headwater forests, which is where about 2/3 of California's water originates from in the Sierra, are that our forests have gotten too dense. We have a lot of small trees, not as many big ones. The big ones were harvested, and then there hasn't been as much harvesting. So we have very dense forests. We've had a lot of tree die-offs. Here you can see a picture with all those brown trees. Those were new deaths. We lost about 15 million dead trees per year during the drought. We've been having, you know, when we went to press with this piece, that was before the Sonoma and Southern California fires had hit. But, you know, we've had some of the largest wildfires in state history and some of the most damaging now, too. And this is risking not only life and property, but also the benefits that forests provide in terms of clean and safe water, air quality, a lot of other benefits. So we did some analysis with a number of forest experts looking at this to say, okay, what can we do to fix this? And there are a lot of folks that have been kind of trying to push for solutions, and we think that right at this point we're at a place where we've got a lot of the ideas, and it's just a matter of rolling up sleeves and implementing them. So one of them is that we need to manage forests more actively. We can't just be spending all of our money fighting fires. We have to go in there and get these forests thinned and get them healthier. And that involves different kinds of what the technical jargon is treatments. It means mechanical thinning. It means managed wildfires. It means prescribed burns in places where that's safe. In order to do that, you have to also just improve keeping track of how this works. A lot of this is on federal land in California. It's a similar problem in other western states. In the federal system, there's not as good accounting for that kind of thing. And we think, you know, there are questions of how you pay for this, that if we did more harvesting, that would actually help pay for it. So there are some solutions that don't have to be very costly for the taxpayer. There are a lot of new collaborative tools for doing this, both on federal lands and in terms of good neighbor policies that allow folks on private lands next to federal lands to come in and help. Different kinds of stewardship programs that are now available. There's actually been some progress just in the last budget that was passed in Congress to help solidify some of these things. And so we think that California really can take advantage of this. Some of the states to the north of us, like Oregon and Idaho and Montana, have been doing a bit better at that than we have. And then now aquatic ecosystems. This is sort of where we're also in big trouble, where in particular with fish, where most of our native fish species are in trouble. Many of them are listed under the Endangered Species Act as threatened or endangered. That's kind of emergency room stage, which means that it's very hard to bring them back from that brink a lot of times, and that's very restrictive then of what you can do in a water project or actually in any kind of construction project near water or wetlands. But you're also starting to see some signs of hope, I think, in folks kind of being tired of the old-fashioned regulatory approach and really looking at, okay, how can we develop projects where you have working lands, where growers and ranchers can be working together with the environmental nonprofits and the fisheries agencies to find ways to make it work. And you're seeing this in wetlands first it started with the rice growers up in Sacramento Valley, where they are using some of their agricultural practices to help waterfowl. In the fall, they flood the rice fields to decompose the rice straw, but they do it now in such a way that it's actually, they time it so that it's also helpful for the Pacific flyway migration. What they're starting to find now is that this can be really helpful for salmon as well. They're starting to have experiments with juvenile salmon, spending some time hanging out in those flooded fields, a lot of good bugs for them to eat and so on. I think we're starting to see this even in places that are a bit drier in the San Joaquin Valley. I'm sure there are examples down here in Southern California as well. So looking for those kind of creative options where people really can get to win-wins, I think is really important. We suggest that a way to kind of reduce the fighting over how much water for the environment and how much water for everybody else is to be much more explicit about giving the environment its budget, its water budget, and having environmental water managers have a seat at the table along with everybody else, being able to trade, work together on joint storage projects and so on. We have a few examples in California where that happens, and it works a lot better than when folks are kind of in an adversarial position where the environment is just the regulatory hammer and not a partner at the table. So now, just to wrap up with the two key watersheds, we highlight both Colorado and the Delta. And these are really important basins for California. I think Charlie showed he had a little drop of water showing the share for Southern California as a whole of water supply. About 45% is from local sources, about 30% is from the Delta, and about 25% is from the Colorado River. And if you look for the Delta, that's actually a similar kind of share, about a third, 30% for the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, as well as for the San Joaquin Valley. But Colorado is also really, it's the source of water for a very thriving agricultural sector in Imperial Valley, as well as in parts of the Coachella Valley. So you really need to think about this for urban reliability as well as for our agricultural sector, which is the leading agricultural sector in the country and a really important source of revenues overall in ag areas. So Delta water supply is, has reliability issues for the reasons that Charlie mentioned. And in the Colorado Basin, there are just challenges of over-allocation of that water among the different states. And in both cases, there are some complex environmental issues. So I'll just walk through for you first, starting on the Colorado. So we've got seven states have shares divvied up the Colorado River water, and Mexico has an allocation. And it's turning out that the overall amount that was divided up is more than the average amount that's now available. And this watershed, this big watershed, is getting drier and is expected to continue to get drier over time. So there's a very good compact in place with sort of, who's got rights to what, but the problem is just that the pie has shrunk. And so folks are having to now figure out what's a fair way of going on a water diet and getting into balance there. There have been some really creative work, I would say, over the last decade in particular, with the states working together, and now the U.S. working together with Mexico on this. We just got a new agreement with Mexico back in the fall to kind of continue where Mexico is involved in some of the creative ideas to share water during shortages, but also creative ways to store water and account for it and get credit for carrying over. Right now, the big sort of sticking point is what's going to happen among the lower basin states, so that's California, Nevada, and Arizona, if the supplies at Lake Mead get below a certain level. Right now, under the rules in place, Arizona and Nevada would get cut off first. California has more senior rights, but folks are kind of looking at that and saying that's probably not, that would not be quite a day zero for Arizona, but it would be really bad for Arizona and for Las Vegas. So folks are looking at ways to kind of make that not happen. and have better contingency plans in place. The other big challenge for the Colorado River is close to home, which is here, which is the Salton Sea, which is where a lot of the irrigation runoff from the Imperial Irrigation District and Coachella Valley goes. Without that, the sea is shrinking, and that in addition to sort of creating aquatic environment challenges, is a big air quality challenge. So folks are really looking hard at making some solutions work there that don't cost too much money. There's a plan in place and agreements to do things, and it seems like it's the last thing I read last week was that it's kind of going a little slow. The Delta, I don't have to say anything, Charlie, right? Because you took care of this for me. No, actually, what I will say is that this is the last year of the Brown administration. So, my guess is neither of the candidates that will be running after the primary are going to want to get out in front on the Delta, because it's kind of like a third rail of politics. So probably everybody's been hoping, who's been working on this issue, that Governor Brown and the Brown administration can kind of hand over a package and say, here, just finish this, but we've got most of the work done. So I would say the vote yesterday from Metropolitan is really important in that regard, because it does allow things to move forward. That doesn't mean there aren't going to be challenges. Charlie mentioned there are going to be lawsuits. There's still a permit to get from the State Water Board for the water rights. And you know, that without the funding, that wouldn't even be able to be happening. So that's a good thing. It's not a done deal yet in terms of getting all the way to the finish line, but it's an important milestone. With or without the tunnels going forward, there is still going to be other issues to deal with in the Delta. And I think actually this is going to be a key part of having some of the folks who are opponents to the project get comfortable with it, is figuring out good solutions for the ecosystem in the Delta. And this is especially how you manage water for critters in that region. There's been an increase in regulations over, especially the last decade, more water reserved for the environment, but some of the species have been crashing over a longer period of time. So figuring out some more creative ways to tackle that. We have some ideas about that suggest kind of moving away from focusing on individual species to focusing on what's a healthy ecosystem look like, and have a little more flexibility in how you manage that. There's also a problem of levees, which is that the folks in the Delta itself, that land is under sea level, and it's protected by levees that work 24/7, and they're not in great shape. They've been improving a bit with some investments, but they still have a lot of earthquake risk. That's why water users want to build these tunnels, partly to have some protection from what happens if there's an earthquake and the whole system kind of gets messed up. From the perspective of folks who work that land, that's not a solution. And so figuring out ways to kind of protect as much of those lands as possible with levee investments and find kind of mitigation solutions for them is an important piece of the package, I think. And with that, I will say thank you. I look for a pretty picture of the Mojave River, so when it's above ground. Thank you.
Thank you. Similar to with Charlie, we've got 2 microphones here. You can raise your hand, we'll get the microphone to you, or if you'd like, you can come down and speak to it directly if you have a question for Ellen. And if there's none ready, I'll get us warmed up. Oh, wait, I see hands. Okay. We've got some hands here, Tony.
So the question was about what special provisions are made for the big earthquake that could come to California. There could be many different big earthquakes that could cause challenges for water infrastructure in California. So what you see around the state is that the regional agencies and big local systems have been looking at this and making a lot of investments to have some, both to strengthen their infrastructure, but also to have some redundancy. I live in San Francisco, and the San Francisco water supplier, for example, supplies not only the city, but also much of the Bay Area. And we've just been we just spent $4 billion on upgrading our system to make it more earthquake proof, because it was in need of that. But I think, when we think about the Delta and the earthquake there, that's often one that's kind of a big issue for supplies for much of the state. As Charlie said, it'll take 17, 18 years or so for the tunnels to be built, assuming that all goes according to plan. In the meantime, what the water utilities have been doing is making sure that they've got plenty of storage, water stored south of the Delta, so that they can ride through either a major drought or that kind of outage where the pumps would be shut down. And they also have strategized on an emergency response plan that could basically, they've got rocks ready and stuff to basically get the pumps back up and running within, I think it's 6 months or something like that. So there is an emergency, there's the emergency plan, but that's not the ideal long-term plan.
Is there a plan for a huge thing in possibly the Yellowstone projection of?
Oh my goodness. You're thinking like the movie 2012? So the trade-off always in infrastructure planning, and this is true for water, it's true for bridges, it's true for freeways and all of that, is you figure out kind of what's the standard that you want to meet and have it be pretty generous, but not necessarily going for the really unlikely event. So probably not the 10.0 earthquake. Yeah.
This is kind of a follow-on to the question I asked Charlie. To really maximize the WaterFix in this new system, we're going to have to be able to use it very efficiently with partners up and down the state. And a lot of that is administrative, being able to capture that storm flow in the actual year that it rains and not have administrative hurdles that you have to get through to trade water efficiently back and forth up and down the state, which has been a problem historically. Does the Institute have a role while we move forward with the building of this project to loosen those controls so we can actually optimize the thing that we're trying to build? What's the Institute's role in this?
So we have been working on some of these issues for a while, and whenever we can, we try to look at, what are the things that could be done with within existing law, where it's just a matter of implementing it and kind of having a little bit more flexibility, and where do you actually need new legislation. And one of the things that's going to be very interesting, I think, now to watch, a space to watch, is there's a lot of interest in looking at, can we capture more flood flows now than, sort of the flows that nobody is using now because the system doesn't have the capacity to handle them. And the Delta tunnels would allow you to take these big gulps of water in years like 2017 when the pumps were maxed out, and there was more water available. That was water that the environment didn't need all of it, so that we could have used more of it. That's true not just for the Delta, but in some other places as well. The State Water Board is going to have to look at that, and we think in an expeditious way to determine, okay, what water, we have to be able to make a call quickly in those situations. What are some good rules of thumb for water that's available for storage in those situations? And I think there's more and more pressure to do that now that we have this groundwater law, where across the state, folks are having to get their groundwater basins into balance. That's a state law, and folks are saying, look, if you want us to be able to meet this, you got to make it possible for us to also recharge our basins. So I'm hopeful. The staff has been saying they are very committed to doing something expeditious, so let's hold them to it.
I've got one. You just spoke to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. I was wondering, most people in this room are probably in an adjudicated basin or close to one, and they manage sustainably. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to what that new law means in the Central Valley, and how, and Charlie referenced it, you referenced it, how that dovetails into twin tunnels, and what that may mean for ag demand, and kind of connecting those dots for those not as close to it.
So California, groundwater has been a local thing in California, and with very little state involvement until recently. So in 2014, at the height of the drought, the legislature passed and the governor signed the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, which was actually like 2 or 3 bills, I think, but because it had to have a lot of authors, so everybody got credit. And what that law requires, it's kind of a uniquely Californian law, and I think in some ways inspired by the fact that there had already been a lot of very good local management through adjudications and special districts, especially in Southern California, a little bit in some coastal areas as well. What it basically says, locals in priority basins, and that's basically pretty much everywhere where there's a significant use of groundwater in the state. So it's like, it covers like 95% of the population or something like that. All those 121 basins have to form groundwater sustainability agencies and develop and start implementing plans to get to sustainability. Now, in basins that the state has designated as critically overdrafted, meaning that over the long term, pumping is greater than the amount that gets recharged, they have until January 2020 to get these plans developed and start implementing them, and everybody else has 2 more years. So it's not a whole lot extra time. And then there's 20 years over which you've got to show progress, and by the end of those 20 years, you've got to attain sustainability. And the sort of stick in this is that if you don't do it, if you fail to kind of meet the different requirements over time, then the state could step in. So it's really local-led, local-driven, but with the fear that if you don't do it, somebody will come in and do it for you. And that's been very motivating to folks who otherwise really do not want, it might be hard to manage a groundwater basin. I mean, you all went through that. It takes some, it takes some effort. But it's more motivating to do it locally than to have somebody come in from outside. And now the sustainability criteria in this law, there are 6 of them. And in that sense, it's an unusual groundwater law compared to what you have in other Western states, which tend to be less comprehensive. So there are 6 sort of what called 6 commandments of SGMA. And let me see if I get them right. You have to not have undesirable effects on groundwater levels, on the amount of water stored in the aquifer, on subsidence, on seawater intrusion, which is especially important in coastal areas, on water quality in other respects, and then on impacts for surface water and for ecosystems. And that's a long list of things. Now, I think most basins don't have to worry about all those problems at once. The severely overdrafted basins tend not to actually have that much connection with surface water anymore because their groundwater levels have gone so far down that that connection is broken. But they have to worry about ending overdraft over time, and that means going on a water diet and finding as many ways to get additional water into their basins as possible. And so that's the link to the San Joaquin Valley in particular, which is an important user of Delta, of water that comes from the Delta, both through the Central Valley Project and the State Water Project. They, I think, probably the San Joaquin Valley gets about more than half of all the water that comes of Delta exports go to the San Joaquin Valley. Millions of acres of farmland use it, and for them, they're going to have to. They have about a 2 million acre foot deficit, so they've got to find a way to address that. Getting extra water through the Delta would be really helpful for them. Getting less water from the Delta because of unreliability of the current system is really not helpful to them, and yet they're in a financial situation where it's risky for them to invest. And I think that's where Metropolitan has made the calculation that, all right, we have an ability to go to bond. We can be the banker of this project, but we know that there's going to be demand, especially from growers of very high value tree crops that need water reliability. So that's kind of a piece of the equation that where I think that they did not manage to, I think Met had wanted to get actual written deals and sort of, yes, we will buy some of this water from you. They didn't quite get that, but they're pretty sure that there's going to be demand for it. And the agriculture in that region has become so high value now that farmers actually were out competing cities during the drought for water on the water market.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, we're going to take a break until 10:45. 10:45 still? 10:47, 2 additional minutes. I will remind you there's a men's room stage left, a women's room stage right. There are larger restrooms if you go outside the building and stick to your right along the building, and you'll find them. Just keep going right along the building. I will see you at 10:47. Thank you.